afford to build the whole thing at one time. So they needed to build a freestanding arena. And we wanted to do that first so that they could start to generate revenue and then build the housing afterwards. It also would have been impossible to do the housing first and then the arena. So, you know, and also they were under a really big timeline because they had, you know, tax abatements that were getting ready to run out. So what they did is they couldn't start from scratch designing this thing. So they went around the country and they toured arenas to find one that would fit on the site. So I kid you not, they liked the Conseco Field House in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they hired the design team, which was LRB Beckett, now AECOM, and they bought it. They bought the plans for the Conseco Field House, and they started ordering steel. This picture got leaked to the New York Times, and city planning got a hold of it, and you can imagine they weren't happy. So and we were hired to fix it. You know, essentially they already had steel, they already had a superstructure. They were just like, we need to fix this. What can you do? We were like, oh my God, like we can't win here. You know, like we're following Frank and Gehry. We're just gonna get clobbered. But you know, it was a job and it's New York, and you know, we love both things. So we started thinking about it, and you know, like how would we, you know, how do we attack this? How do we break down this big hulking mass? How do we relate to the pedestrian experience? How do we create views in and out? And we started thinking of this kind of orange peel wrapper that would kind of lightly touch down on the steel structure that had already been ordered. And, you know, there's a subway there. This is actually sitting on top of like every subway in Manhattan. You know, every subway in the 5 boroughs kind of comes through here. It's a big juncture. There's another thing that was really tricky about it. So you come out of the subway on the plaza. So we thought of you're coming up, and we wanted to make this welcoming gesture. So we pulled out a kind of canopy Oculus, and you have views as you come up the subway as you come up the escalator from the subway, you have views, and then you have views into the scoreboard. And we also thought a lot about the materiality, right? Like the sort of bridging between the low-rise brownstone neighborhoods to one side, to a very commercial industrial neighborhood on the other side, because it's literally on that border. And, you know, and just thinking a lot about this sort of this kind of grit and glamour of that is this part of Brooklyn. And this was our first rendering that we showed to the client, and they were like, wow, that's great, we love it, but it looks really expensive and we don't know how to build it. So they hired us to help them figure out how to build it. And obviously this is something where we needed, you know, all the 3D tools that we use. And so this is what I call the meta geometry model, which is a kind of a light model that just kind of locates every panel. There's 12,000 unique panels in this project. And so each one of them is located parametrically. So if we have to push and pull and make changes, it automatically then flows through to the actual fabrication model, which is a much heavier model. Each and every panel with its folds, its tabs, its slotted holes, and even like down to burr cuts. And then we used nesting software to, this is like comes from fashion industry, right? Garment cutting. So we used this software to figure out the most economical panel sizes to minimize material waste. And we wanted to use Corten steel, you know, that beautiful rusted steel. We couldn't really afford it. So we found a fabricator that would make essentially weathered Corten steel for us. And here you can see the panels in the factory going through wet and dry cycles. And that simulates 9 years of weathering in 3 to 4 weeks. And what happens is like the rust builds up like a crust, and it actually protects the steel. So when it gets to a certain thickness, it's done. And you can put it on your building. And so each of these individual panels were then assembled into mega panels with the backup glass, the curtain wall. They were shrink wrapped, put on a truck, and delivered to the site for installation. And you can imagine that just-in-time delivery was pretty important. So, you know, each thing had to show up in the right sequence. And so we actually wrote an app for the iPhone so that every panel had a barcode that would get scanned at every station. And then we had a live web portal where you could, like basically any stakeholder could click on links that they had access to, and they could find out where panels were in the process so that we didn't lose them. And then that digital model wound up being used not just for fabrication, but also to help the construction process. And this was especially important at the cantilever where we have that big oculus, right? Because you can imagine the structural steel is designed for a fully loaded, right? All of the panels on it. But when it's erected, it's not fully loaded yet. So it hasn't deflected yet. And as you put all the panels on, it deflects sequentially. So, we actually went out with laser scanners every day and scanned the location of the brackets on the steel to make sure that they were correctly positioned with the brackets on the panels or on the mega panels. And you can imagine where we've got trucks showing up at the corner of Flatbush and Atlantic, traffic is shut down. We're getting ready for a crane pick. It's got to fit, right? So they all fit. This is the finished building with the plaza. And originally we were just hired. We were just hired to do concept, and then we were hired to figure out how to build it. And then as we became a more valuable member of the team, they asked us to take on more scope, which included design of this whole plaza with the subway entrance. So we added the green roof to the building, and all of the interiors. And we really wanted to keep that raw industrial feeling, and we used lighting to great effects. We didn't have a great huge budget for this, but we figured you can do a lot with light. So that extends to bringing the geometry of the panels inside with the lighting on the concourse. All of the hospitality spaces, including the 40/40 Club, which was Jay-Z's club. I don't know if you guys know this, but Jay-Z is a part owner of the Nets. So he actually had a lot to do with design of the hospitality spaces. And in fact, he, thank goodness, he helped design the uniform. So everything was black and white. So we didn't have crazy colors we had to do it. And then all of the vendors on the concourse are like from local neighborhood, restaurants. And so we really tried to capture that character through the kind of the vibe and the materials. And then down on the there's a VIP courtside lounge, which was also Jay-Z's lounge. And so we used his champagne bottles in this kind of wall to create this great backdrop to the bar. And then we also designed a custom lighting fixture, which, and it was all laser cut from brass. And I love the idea that we used the exact same technology to make a lighting fixture that we did to make the panels of the building. And the scale of this building, it's obviously like a very large scale when you look at it as a backdrop to these smaller buildings. But I think the texture and materiality of that facade really helps to translate between that scale of the lower rise older neighborhood to over to the more commercial high rise district exactly on the other side. And the piazza has really been embraced by the community. They have green markets, dance performances. Everyone comes by subway. There's no traffic or parking issues, which is a huge win for the neighborhood. And then another master planning project, Essex Crossing. So this site is 1.6 million square feet. It's I can't remember how many city blocks at this point. But this was an area that was a Lower East Side that was originally called Seward Park. But that didn't sound so good. And I don't know if you guys have heard the movie Crossing Delancey. That takes place in this neighborhood. So they rebranded the site as Essex Crossing. It sounds much nicer. And this is what the site looked like. So this was a site controlled by the city. The city had torn down all the tenement buildings in the 60s as part of urban renewal. But then the site got caught up in political battles, and it sat vacant for 50 years and was used for a parking lot. You can imagine this is a blight in this community. And in 2008, the city actually started engaging with the community and did it the right way for once. They worked on this project for 5 years before they put out an RFP. So they engaged with the community, held lots of meetings, really listened and figured out what people wanted. And so when the RFP was issued, we kind of knew, like we weren't making this up. We were able to like very clearly fulfill those needs. And this was what we call a P3 project, public-private partnership. So that's a pretty common way these days that cities or municipalities get projects developed. So they provide the site and they ask for bids, and developers will come and bid on doing the project. And so we were part of a team with actually a few other architects, and 3 developers formed a consortium. You know, and one of the things that was really important to the community was, you know, to really maintain the small scale connections of the neighborhood, the 3-block connections. So we thought of this as sort of a spine, and you know, but keeping porosity at the ground plane. And another thing that they really had a desire for was public and community spaces that would be integrated across the site. And so this is a planning diagram. It shows, the subway is also here. So, so this is a diagram that shows the kind of section cut through this spine with the connections to transit below, and then coming up with keeping that really low, you know, the small scale retail connections at the lower level at the street, and then putting the big box programs more up higher. And you can see that here, how that's working here. This is the International Center for Photography, which was part of one of our sites. We did the whole master plan, but then wound up only working on 2 of the projects because all the projects went to other architects. It was a huge site. So we did a condominium here with the International Center for Photography, and then also we were really thinking about how it's not just the spaces that we share, but it's the history and the memories. They're really important reference in bringing people together around their idea of shared community and what how they want to go forward. And so this was especially important on the site because it had a strong history of immigration. And there was a lot of nostalgia for the sort of the old, the old restaurants and food culture. And so we really wanted to bring that kind of sensibility into the new market hall when we started designing that. So we did the interior of Essex Market. We really tried to capture that feeling of kind of the old neighborhood, being in the heart of the new neighborhood. And one of the community spaces here is a test kitchen, demonstration kitchen. And this has turned out to be a really great feature. They do food education. And during COVID, this was the site, this became home to an organization called Heart of Dinner, which partners with local restaurants and farms to bring fresh packed meals to elderly Asians in the community who were really shut in and isolated during COVID. So this was really incredible to kind of have your space be such a vital part of the community in this way. Oh, the other thing I love is if you go there when school lets out, all the kids in the neighborhood are there getting a bite to eat and doing their homework, and it's just really cool. So, in New York, we have universities that are urban and are, also sort of communities in their own right. And in 2003, so going back again, we won a competition to do a new building for FIT, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. It's at 28th Street and 7th Avenue. And you can see here, the site is this little narrow bar. And it's really kind of, technically it's an addition to this building because there's no space between them. And, this is kind of embarrassing because this is, the preeminent fashion design school in the preeminent fashion design city in the nation. And you would kind of not know it looking at this building, right? It's the whole campus is these 70s brutalist buildings where you can't see any of the incredible work that's going on. It's very opaque and kind of foreboding. This is the site on 28th Street. And that's, you can see the kind of building envelope there of the site. And the one really great feature of the site is the backside of that building that we're going to be building right up against. So, so we really wanted to find a way to incorporate this facade into the interior of our new building. And, you know, this is a really 2003. We did a really conceptual design for this building that we wanted it to be about transparency. We wanted it to be all about like sort of, giving a new identity of the school and being able to see in and see all the activity and putting all of the circulation on the facade. And also, the campus had no like indoor sort of student life space. Kids would congregate outdoors in this area. In the summer, they called it the quad. So we wanted to make at the 5th floor, which is the level that kind of connects all the different buildings on the campus, we wanted to create, the sort of grand lounge space, double height, which we called the winter quad. And this was the sort of how we thought about the components of this building coming together, the 2 end bars, which is where we put all of the, the fire stairs and the 2 cores. And then, sort of conventional construction here, and this kind of bridge that comes across, creating column-free space at the 5th floor. And then this, very avant-garde kind of facade. And we really, obviously, were referencing a lot of things about sort of weaving and folding and layering in that facade, stitching. And we thought a lot about how it might get made and, how we could kind of use how we could get that glass to make these shapes without having a lot of heavy structure. And like I said, it was very conceptual and it never got funded. So this never got funded. The city never got into the budget for the city. And honestly, the school didn't really know what they wanted to do. They couldn't come to consensus. And so we really didn't take it any further than this. But in forming a relationship with the school, we wound up doing lots of other work for them. We did master planning. We renovated an entire lab building. So we maintained and built our relationship with the school. They really liked working with us. And in 2016, 13 years after we won the competition, they finally funded the project. And so by this time, building codes had drastically changed. We had to go back and do redesign. And quite honestly, our office had also matured a lot in terms of our design sensibility. So we kind of took the opportunity to like, okay, we'll clean this up a little bit. We flattened the glass on the front facade, still trying to keep that transparency. And we sort of tried to move that idea of the weaving and the stitching to the inside, where we had this, all of the vertical circulation. And we had some ideas about creating these sort of sculptural panels, woven panels so that the light would reflect off of them from the outside and you'd see them. We were doing mock-ups. But, we still had this, gap on the other side of the building up against the original Feldman with that beautiful folded metal facade. And we went through a VE process, which you guys know that's value engineering. Usually that just means cutting cost, but sometimes it means actually finding real value in the building. And floor area is valuable. And so here we are building this huge container and we've got 2 big gaps in it with no floor. So it became pretty obvious to us through this process that we should take the circulation off the facade and put it into this slot and fill up the space on the front with floors. So this was a very early conceptual idea of what that might look like. So we changed the building yet again. And I actually think this is really great. So we took a lot of that complexity out. We chose to really focus on emphasizing that 5th floor student life space. So also pulling although the classrooms and offices now are on the facade of the building. So we had to think a lot more about, about the thermal controls there. So we went with a more reflective environmental performing glass on the rest of the building, and then kept that real transparency to emphasize that 5th floor lounge. And I think all the really important parts of the original concept are still there, maybe even stronger than they were, more refined. And, we kept that transparency and visibility in at the ground level so people going by can really, have views into everything that's going on. There's a lot of exhibition space. You can look down and see into the knitting lab, really important feature. And we have the the fifth floor hall with the two kiosks at the end. One is a cafe and the other is library services with printing facilities. And it's under construction. Finally, we can't stop now. We've topped out, the facade's on, and we're going to be moving into building out the interiors now. So super excited to get this far, and maybe next time I'm here, I'll be able to show photographs of the completed building. These are all projects that were in New York, like really in my backyard in a way, and so I really wanted to emphasize the way that we engage community, and kind of in an almost like really hands-on kind of way, visceral kind of way. When we do work outside of New York and around the world, we obviously can't have that same intensity of engagement, but I feel like, we engage in other ways. And when you think about, environmental performance and taking care of the environment is also about taking care of people. It's about taking care of people in the global community and not just our backyard. And quite honestly, in New York City, it's hard to do some of the things that we would like to do with environmental performance. We have old building stock. We have New York City hates timber. We don't have really the right environment for natural ventilation. It's just a really tough place sometimes to build the most, to be maybe innovative as we would like to be around environmental performance. So some of our projects outside of New York, we've been able to innovate better. And I did a whole case study on Uber during the studio in the fall, so I'm not going to talk about Uber, but I do want to just talk about a couple of things. One of them is natural ventilation. So this is Uber's headquarters in Mission Bay in San Francisco, and we did a fully natural ventilated facade. And this is the portion of the building that is naturally ventilated, right? There's no mechanical ventilation. And it's a buffer zone. It's got all of the vertical circulation. It's got lounges. It's got sort of breakout space, but it's not heads down workspace. The heads down workspace happens behind that wrapper, right? So back here. And this is a wonderful space. People love to be in this space. Actually, when the windows are opening and closing, it's completely silent. So it's kind of incredible. You don't hear the hum of mechanical ventilation, of air being moved. It's just completely natural, and people really love it. But the heads down workspace and sort of conventional office space, which is conventionally thermally heated and cooled, is back here. But this this space acts as a buffer zone, right? So it does take a lot of the thermal load off of the interior space. So it does really improve energy performance. And we took some of those ideas about natural ventilation to a project we're doing in Australia, which is the new headquarters for Atlassian in Sydney. We won this project through an international competition. The client actually was incredible. They spent, an enormous amount of effort before the competition to prepare a brief. They hired engineers and, structural engineers, environmental engineers, and they prepared a brief. So we already knew coming in that this was going to be a hybrid CLT building. This project is it's about 35 stories tall. It's broken up into a superstructure that's steel. We call it the mega structure, and there's a steel deck every 5 floors, and then there's 4 floors of CLT that are sandwiched in between each of those. So we can't build a 35-story timber structure, right, for fire reasons, but so we have fire separation every 5 floors with the superstructure. So we were given this brief that really kind of did a lot of the lifting for us in terms of what the client wanted, and they also wanted natural ventilation to be built into this. And so this is each of those floors we call a habitat. Each of those mega floors we call a habitat. And you can see this would be the steel deck here. We call this the park area. This is all naturally ventilated. And then we have a band of semi-controlled, and then there's the fully thermally controlled, but it's also innovative. So it's not forced air. It's more like chiller panels. And you can do this in Sydney. Probably couldn't do this here. So this is what one of those decks looks like with the parks, and you can see that this is the fully naturally ventilated, no thermal control. This is the modulated sort of blend zone, and then the fully innovatively thermally controlled space, which is more of the heads down. And the thing here is this is really also about people. It's about educating people differently to think about a building as more of a natural ecosystem, right? If you're working at home, and this happened during the pandemic, if you're uncomfortable working at the kitchen, you can move to a different room. Or if you're cold, you can put on a sweater. Or if you're hot, you can open a window, right? We come to office buildings and they're hermetically sealed and you're supposed to keep them at 73 degrees. And we know that's like not possible, right? There's always somebody who's sitting next to the air conditioning who's freezing, or someone who's, in the window with the sun beating on them who's too hot. So it's a myth that we can keep hermetically sealed office buildings all at the same temperature, and people also have different levels of comfort. So this is really about educating people that, hey, you can get up and walk around. We're going to provide different modes of working. We're going to have the head down workspace where maybe you're stuck at your desk. We're going to have meeting spaces. We're going to have more kind of loose, informal workspaces that you can get up and go around. And then we're going to have this park, and you can go sit and work with your laptop in the park. And if you're cold, you can put on a sweater. If you're hot, you can move. It's just a different way of thinking about how we live and work in buildings. And these are some of the renderings showing what one of those habitats looks like with the operable windows. Interior, we're working with amazing landscape architects here. This is an early rendering, but that we did. But this is developed so that each of those park habitats is a different type of local garden, if you will. So that's going to be incredible. And up at the top, we call this the crown. And this is where we're putting a lot of the amenity spaces. Fitness center, you'll be able to go outside, sit outside with amazing views. So this project we won this project in 2019. I went to Australia twice, during the lead up. I went once for the competition workshop. I went again after we won. And then I was planning to come back a month later and the whole world shut down. And I spent the next 2 years on Zoom with Australia. But we've broken ground and super excited to get this one underway. And then a project that we actually started in 2009, which was also a competition, was for the Botswana Innovation Hub. And this is a project for the government of Botswana. They were really trying to get away from dependency on mining and natural resources. So they're trying to bring innovation and technology investment into the country. And so this project was really, this is what they call the head house, which is the first project in a kind of planned campus. And we really thought of this as what we call dune and delta, right? These kind of these xeriscape roofs punctuated by these oases, right? They're lushly planted and cooling. Big overhanging roofs for shade. And these are cooling fins on the roof to help we call this the energy blanket because it helps the building self-cool and breathe. And there's a section through that. So you can see we actually have parking. We have parking below grade. We have these are the oases, courtyards, and that xeriscape roof. And this building, the first phase was completed in I think this was 2018 that I was there. It's absolutely stunning. The landscape is coming in already. This was when it was first planted. This is when I was there in 2018. You can almost barely see the building from inside and out. So it's actually doing its job. And this is the roof. It's so sad that this roof is not occupiable because it's one of the most beautiful, roofs that no one will ever see. All planted with natural plantings that don't require any kind of irrigation or anything. And there's like birds and butterflies, and it's just incredible up there. And this stonework, this is a local kind of way of placing stone that that resists erosion. And we had originally thought this whole thing was going to be concrete, and they couldn't get it right and couldn't get it right. And they finally said, "Can we just make it out of stone?" Like, oh yeah, that would be great. So it's incredible. And I want to close talking about another kind of environmental performance, which is to use what we have. I think this is really important, and particularly now, because I think we're at a place with the economy where a lot of people are putting the brakes on building new. They can't get financing. They're starting to think, they're looking at their existing portfolio and they're thinking, well, what have we got that we can use? And I think this is a really, it doesn't get the kind of headlines that some of the new ground up buildings get, but I think it's really important. I think it's a really important key piece of building responsibly is to look at what we have and try to use it when we can. So here's all the benefits. I put financial at the top because this is my pitch deck to developers. So I'm going to leave the financial. It's cheaper and faster. But there really is nothing greener than reusing the building you already have. You can maintain continuity of operations through phasing your construction. And the impact on the community can be significant because when you think about demolishing a building and then years and years and years of traffic and noise and dust, and also like there's buildings that are beloved as part of the fabric of the community, and it's really important if to keep that if we can. I mean, there's times when you can't, when buildings aren't worth saving, but I think it's important to consider that always before you tear something down and build new. And down in Texas, in Houston, we worked with Rice University to take an old Sears, abandoned Sears department store building, beautiful Art Deco building, and repurpose it as Houston, Ion Houston, they call it. And we work with Jamie Carpenter, the glass artist, and Gensler is our local. And we converted this building into a new tech incubator. And they have incredible programming here. It's just like, it's amazing. It's got a whole new lease on life. And with Uber, they have an office in Oakland. We worked with them to restore this building. The brick was not in great shape. We couldn't save it, so it's been reclad in terracotta. I think we did a good job of sort of maintaining his sort of historical contextuality, but still being modern. In Santa Fe, we worked with Site Santa Fe Museum. They had their galleries in an old brewery building, and no climate control whatsoever. Really did not work for them very well. So we restored the entire building, added space, fully climate controlled galleries, archive space, roof deck, and then we wrapped the whole thing in this perforated metal skin. Very simple, but gave them additional indoor space. It gave them a real entry and a new identity in the community. And I'm going to close with the building that was mentioned in the introduction, which is 335 Madison Company. And this is an existing 1.1 million square foot building, full block, right next to Grand Central Station in downtown Manhattan or Midtown Manhattan. And it actually started life as this beautiful Beaux-Arts hotel building. Right here, you can see it right next to Grand Central. It's actually linked to Grand Central by underground walkway. And this in this podium level, you can see this was the historic Palm Court, which is really a landmark destination interior in the city. And you can see that this is a U-shaped building, right? Above the podium, it's got two sides and a back that you can't see, but it's open on this side. So in the 1980s, this building was stripped down to its steel. They enclosed the fourth side. They reclad it all in red granite, and it became a Bank of America headquarters. And you can see this entrance is just like horrible. This is the main entrance on Madison Avenue. You actually have to go down to get into the building. It was dark, it was wet, really, and obviously not handicapped accessible. The only handicapped accessible entrance in the entire building is this one. Through a loading dock on 43rd Street, on Vanderbilt, opposite Grand Central. Grand Central is right over here. You had to, if you're in a wheelchair, you had to come in here, you had to go through the loading dock, you had to get in a service elevator with the operator guy pushing buttons, boxes piled all around, mops, go up to the 3rd floor, which is where you could go across and access the elevator banks. The reason the elevator banks are on 3 is because parts of Grand Central actually extend under this building, and you couldn't like drop you couldn't drop full elevator banks. So they just didn't do anything. This was the 1980s. We didn't even have ADA in New York City, let alone the federal. So and our ADA predates the federal. We were 1987. So the first thing we did was we said we have to fix that. Oh, and this was the interior. So like right? I mean, yeah, you went from historic Palm Court to this. This was an improvement, right? And I want you to pay attention to this little funky terrarium thing. Because I'm going to show you what we did with that later. The only redeeming feature of the entire building is this atrium, which is this 30-story atrium with this incredible skylight. So there was something good here. We got involved with this client because they had a tech incubator in the building. It was called Grand Central Tech, and this building was like horribly underperforming, but they started this tech incubator, one of the younger family members, and their idea was like was that as they graduate, startups from this incubator program, they'd take space in the building, but nobody wanted to be in this building. Like, you imagine you're a young tech startup. Do you want to be in that building? So, our kind of what we were charged with was, how do we create that kind of downtown neighborhood vibe and buzz in this midtown office building? So we started with really programming exercise, and the client was great, and they gathered lots of data and talked to all the tenants in the building and figure out what people wanted. And it really kind of coalesced around a kind of a hospitality wellness, people wanted places that they could meet and talk and congregate, and in a sense, bring back that old world, hotel lobby feeling. And so that's from the top of the atrium looking down in the finished project. And coming in, so this is when you come up, the escalators. So what we did with this building is, 1.1 million square feet. We did an infrastructure upgrade to the entire building. So new elevators, new escalators, new fire, mechanical, AV, data, lot of structural upgrades. So that was the whole building. And then we got renovated from the 8th floor down, which is what I showed you in that section, going back. So like this whole portion from 8 all the way down to 2 sub-cellars, complete gut. And we did this with the building fully occupied. So we did it in 3 phases, actually like 6, count all the phases, but 3 big phases, opening a different entrance, each time. We've got a coffee shop, and there's a real bar. There's a 6,000 square foot bar right opposite Grand Central and Vanderbilt. So during the day, this is open to the tenants, and they can come in and they coffee and light snacks. And then at night, people they open at 4 to the public, and it's packed. Till people come in for a drink before getting on the train, heading upstate or wherever they're going. And we're still in construction on 2 more phases, which is a big food hall and spa fitness, which is in the subcellar. And that's all in that lower part. So all of these are all pretty much, public amenities. moving up the building, Grand Central Tech, we started doing all this work on the building, and Grand Central Tech said, wait a minute, we started it all, you have to renovate our space too. So there's a lounge, amphitheater. We don't have an auditorium in the building, so this has become the kind of de facto auditorium. Lots of companies book this. Companies throughout the whole building book their auditorium, which I think you can, I don't have a picture of the Spanish steps, if that's the stage. And then there's steps that you can sit on, auditorium style. And this looks out at Grand Central. Can you believe when we took this over, they had offices built, like solid walls built into this. They had perimeter offices and you didn't see that. So yeah. And then we also did 3 floors. So about roughly 100,000 feet of fully built out, ready to move in office space. Because if you're a tech startup, the last thing you want to do is like go have to find a space, negotiate a lease, hire an architect, get building permits, build out a space. I mean, by the time you've got it built, you're going to be ready to move. And there's an enormous amount of waste associated with this. And our client really understood that because his family owns commercial office buildings. And he said, you won't believe how much waste there is. Companies move in, they rip everything out, they build something new. 6 months later, they've outgrown it. They rip, somebody else comes in. He's like, it's awful. Can't we just build something that's really nice that people can like grow and shrink and move? So we did, we sort of created this kit of parts, pantries, conference rooms, desking, and it's deployable. So we did small, medium, large spaces throughout these 3 floors, and they literally can't lease them fast enough. I mean, they're always leased up. So when you talk about commercial office glut, people should do more stuff like this. People, companies really want flexibility, and they don't want to have to take the time to, for that huge heavy lift of fitting out a space every time they move. And then some of the tenant only amenities are this cafe on the 7th floor with a roof deck overlooking Grand Central. We've got a couple of bars out there. I should mention that they monetize every square inch of this place. So in addition to, to the rent roll that they collect for office space, they have their own in-house hospitality division, like world-class hospitality people. And this place is fully booked all the time, every single space. There's presentation space. And this is a 2-story library lounge called the Perch that overlooks that atrium. And remember that little weird terrarium? So we pulled that out, we restructured it, we made it into this double height space. That's it. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Anybody have a question?
Hi, thank you so much for this lecture. It was kind of like hearing like a master talk about their work. At least for me. It was like talking about urban design at different scales, different locations, and different ways you fit out. My question is, as a like more experimental designer, how do you go about how did you go about building up this company and or building up this group of people who are both extremely creative but competent and capable of building finishing up a project?
I think those 2 things are mutually exclusive, right? Like being really creative and being competent. Believe it or not, a lot of the world out there thinks there is such a thing. That's why design architects and executive architects, right? They think, oh, you're the creative thinker over here, but you can't be trusted to, follow building code or build a building that doesn't leak. And then, we're going to hire these guys over here to kind of be the grown-ups and build a building. And honestly, sometimes that works. And we work with really great executive architects around the world. Some are better than others. Some really partner and try to get into what you're trying to do and be on board with that and help support it, and others kind of tell the client like, oh, they don't know what they're doing. We've got much better ideas. So you have to. I think the thing is you have to choose your battles, and obviously like starting very very small and trying to find one thing. Like what's one thing you can do? So I don't know. Like you're not going to go out and in one project get every single thing. Be experimental and pushing the boundaries, right? You've got to sort of say, in this project, where are the opportunities? How can I sell them? How can I execute on them? And you have to be very, you have to be willing to put in the work, because that's what, we wouldn't call it experimental if we already knew how to do it. So I think it's like, it's a level of belief in yourself. It's a level of putting in the elbow grease and saying like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it, to make it happen. I'm not going to, I think the real key is I'm not going to just draw up my little conceptual fantasy and throw it over the wall for somebody else to figure out. It won't get done, right? You have to do the hard work yourself. And then and then the client will have the trust in you as the person with the answers. And then they'll let you do more of what you want to do.
Hoping someone from 600 last semester would ask a question.
Hi, what are you doing in your community meetings that makes them so successful?
Oh gosh, I think mainly listening. People want to be heard, and I think the thing is, people are reasonable. They know that everybody can't have everything that they want, right? And when you come together as a community and sometimes people get very strident. Parts are the worst because you have the people who want like clean, tranquil space, and you've got the people who want the sports fields and the dog runs. So that can get actually very contentious. I think dog runs are the most contentious thing I've ever sat in. That and the bar noise, but yeah, I mean, I think, look, as a whole, people understand, they get it that there's trade-offs. They get it that you can't have your way over somebody else's way unilaterally. But I think the thing is they want to be heard. And if you bring people together, you let them have voice, you let them be part of the conversation, they're going to feel like they have ownership. We'll come back and you show them, like, here's what the trade-offs are, and we can, if we do this, we can't do this, but here's how we're trying. And sometimes it means taking a piece of that thing and moving it someplace else, because you can't have the sports field with tranquil, with park benches. But it's all part of a conversation and a dialogue, and I think it's really important that people feel like they're part of it, and that they're heard, and that their input is having some effect, and then they'll feel real ownership and get support behind it.
Thank you.
Final question.
So you work with a lot of like experimental ideas, and obviously you have a lot of experience. Can you talk about how you sort of apply your like general experience whenever you have a new idea that maybe like hasn't been done before, or you don't know how to like fully bring it out?
I think a lot of the things that we're coming up with are, there's solutions to problems, right? So the problem is presented. We're not just coming up with ideas sort of out of the blue or in a vacuum, right? And we're also working, remember, with like lots of like really great partner collaborators, So when we talk about environmental performance, we're working with, like great environmental engineers, mechanical engineers, so we're not coming up with these ideas on our own. We're more in a way the orchestrator, the translator, and for instance, with Uber, we didn't start out with the idea of a natural event. That started because the client wanted an absolutely transparent building. And I don't know if you guys who were here, sat through the whole case study. We went into this in great depth, but the natural ventilation was a response to how do we create a facade that's absolutely transparent and still meet energy code, which in California is pretty limited. And it was a sort of, it was sort of like group think workshopping that with lots of different ideas looked at that kind of led to that. Then we sort of took the architecture on it.
All right, I think we're out of time here. Corey, it's so fascinating and energizing to see the trajectory of your work at SHoP Architects over the X number of years. And we hope that you'll continue to come back and show us where things head in the next few years. So thank you. Thank you very much.